I think a big question that comes up with people learning tracking specifically is the question of how to become more aware. How to become more aware as a tracker.
Yeah, well, and then what do we mean by awareness? And when people say they want to become, and that's, most people who are coming to my classes wanted to become more aware. Mm-hmm. The image of the tracker was this person who sees things nobody else sees. And that's the image, to me, that they were aspiring to, trying to attach themselves to. But remember we talked about that no matter how aware you are, you can walk through, you take a person out of the ghetto and put them in here, out of the city and put them in here, and even if they're a profoundly aware person, they're not going to see much. Just not, because there's no intimacy. So if people are looking to be more aware in the forest, in the sense of seeing things and in a sense of having the forest speak to them about all kinds of wildlife activity, there needs to be an intimacy. They need to become intimate with this landscape. And once that happens, they're going to be more aware of the various activities taking place. So in that sense, oh, look at him, he's coming right back. Now what's with it? So we're looking at a raven. So the raven is circling right above us. He's going to be curious because he's definitely circling right above us, and low, we can hear his wings whistling. That's not usual.
Coming back again. So what I hear you saying is basically...
So people, let's let them do something, and that's something people can do. They can become more aware in that way.
Being part of the forest, just being in it.
And just developing, and there's no other way to do that than to be here. Put their time in, and the more time they spend, the more they're going to see and be aware of. But that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And can we, maybe we should elaborate on that so that it's clear.
It's a good distinction to make.
I think it's a really good distinction.
Because people often come to these aspects trying to feel more connected, be more connected, more aware. And there certainly will be a sense of connection to their surroundings and relationship. But if in a deep inward internal relationship connection to what we've described, it might not necessarily be the same thing.
Right, there's something different there. So there's some similarities to an inner tracking. So in the inner tracking, you're going within and becoming intimate with the place, just like this. You get to know the place. You become more aware in that way, just like you become more aware here. You become more aware about how thought moves and stuff like that just by observing. I mean, this takes observation. You close your eyes, you wouldn't learn anything. You have to be open, and we expressed the importance of being open. Mm-hmm. Have openness and not to jump to conclusions and wrong assumptions, but to stay open, and that way the process becomes more refined and more intimate. More things open up. Otherwise, when we come to a very rigid conclusion, we're no longer open to learning. So when we're hanging around in the inner landscape, that same thing is happening. But what we're saying is there are some things that we're not seeing. There's always some things we're not seeing. And on the inner landscape, we're suggesting we're creating some divisions that we're not intimate with, that we can't see. And the way we're looking is creating a division. The process of looking itself is creating a division that we're unaware of, and we're trying to point that out.
Mm-hmm.
So the process that we're trying to explore with itself needs to be seen clearly. That's the trick. There's where awareness comes in, an awareness that is not from any direction. It's not from a center. So a whole thing can be seen. As long as awareness is from a center, then it's fragmented. So there's a difference there. And that's the tough part.
What wants to become more aware in this can be coming from that center.
Right, yes, is coming from that center. Most of the time, when people enter the forest, they're actively trying to be more aware. They think they have control over awareness. And in that, there's self-concern. I might not be aware enough. I have to learn more. I don't know enough. And what ends up happening is the seat of energy is in that concern. And part of the energy of awareness is taken up in that concern. So that there's less energy to actually become intimate with the forest. Because part of the energy is usurped into self-concern. Mm-hmm. So get rid of the self-concern, and I think the learning process will become much, much better. The learning process will be better.
Well,
I don't know if that makes it clear.
If you're more, if one is experiencing more open, they might actually maybe see things that you haven't quite seen before, because they're more open to seeing and looking at the surroundings, not particularly through the lens of trying to be more aware, which actually might consume the energy of actually seeing what's around. And I don't want to make it sound like, being open is going to make someone see things around that they wouldn't see before. But there's less energy wrapped up, like you just said, more in the self-concern of being aware, which means more energy is actually involved in being present with what's actually here.
Yeah, good way to put it. And we could talk about it in these terms too. We could go back to that notion of passion for truth. Mm-hmm. If one comes here in the forest with a passion for truth, just with a real interest in the forest itself, in what's happening here, there's where their energy is. They want to really understand what's happening here. They don't, there's no self-concern, there's just a passion to understand this for itself. And there's openness.
I think what we've tried to do, though, through the video is show that same thing, because some people might do that in that context.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's a context set up to this environment, right. Openness, yeah, it's here. And they're not self-concerned, they're here. They feel connected to this place on the level we've described, but they might not necessarily see that it is in these other areas of the inner landscape.
Right. When inner tracking, the same thing, if we could say, is needed, which is kind of not correct because it intimates that someone's doing something.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same process in inner tracking as it is, as we just described for outer tracking here, the passion for truth. Just wanting to understand this for itself. Well, I want to understand what thought's doing. I don't, I have no, it doesn't have to be doing X or not doing X. What is it doing? It's just like you come in the forest and you look at a tracking. Well, what is it? I think it's a coyote, but I want to know for sure. I don't care if I'm right or wrong. I go inwardly and I look, and so-and-so says there's no self. Well, what's the truth about that? I think there's a self, but am I wrong? What's the truth? Do I really want to know the truth? Am I open? Although I think, yeah, I got a self. But can I be open to explore that a little more? Same thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Right.
Right. And I guess that's kind of what my questions we're looking into is there's no separation really between the openness that one would be experiencing in being open and learning about their environment here than any different than learning anything about oneself.
Seems that way, yeah.
Want to walk a little further?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll be turning up towards